Who wants a pot of coffee? I just made coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Sure, there you go. Who wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? Who wants coffee?
And now it's time for the man with the caffeine, the new tropics for the brain. It's Coffee with Mike. Hang in, hang tight, grab your cup, and let's get this thing started.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Java Chat. I'm Coffee with Mike, and I get to sit here with a gentleman that I think will find a lot of really interesting conversation here. He's the author of the bestseller, The School of Intentional Living. And if that title doesn't tell you this is going to be a good podcast, you're not paying attention. May I introduce to you Mr. Sean Rosensteel. Sean, thanks for coming and joining us on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure.
So the title of your book was what got my attention when I had Brianna reach out to you. I was just like, go find this guy and go get him on the show. We need to find out what this intentional living deal is about. But before we get into the book and the whole subject of intentional living, do us a favor and give our listeners a good idea of who Sean Rosensteel is. Where are you from? What's your story, man?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I actually recently moved to Dallas from Chicago.
Good move.
I think it is. It was
love
tough.
Dallas.
I love Dallas too.
Yeah.
I also love Chicago. I was born and raised there, so it was
still a great city, no doubt. Just the cold
cold and it's gone through some changes over the past few decades, and
it has.
Yeah, it was a tough decision because my folks were there, and that's why we were there. They're in their mid 70s, and my wife's parents are much younger. So we figured, well, 10 more years, this chapter closes, we'll move south.
Yeah.
And we've been coming here for our winters to Dallas for the past 6-7 years, which has been nice. And when we got down here this year in January, and this is really before the pandemic kind of hit the headlines.
Yeah.
I got a call from my mom, and she's like, "Hey, hon, we're moving to South Carolina.
Your
Father and I are moving." And we're like, "Oh, wow." And she's like, "Do you want to come?" And we're like, "No, not at all." We're like, our next move is Dallas,
Yeah.
So they ended up moving, and we're sitting down here, and now it's like February, March. The headlines are starting to hit about the pandemic. And we're like, well, maybe we'll move not in 10 years, but 2 to 3 years. And eventually we said, we have no idea what the state of Illinois is going to look like, or any, the state of anything, right? There's so much uncertainty, but if we wait another 2 or 3 years, we've got 3 kids, 7 and under, they're in school, they're making friends, we're making friends. And it's like, we might as well just rip the Band-Aid. What's the sense now of waiting 2 to 3 years if our anchor is, pulling up, going out to South Carolina, right?
Yep.
So we remotely sold our home. We had a dream team back in Chicago that helped us through the whole process.
That's awesome.
Furiously got into the minivan with the kids, drove 16 hours north to pack our house in 30 days. And
wow,
we closed. And we've been down here ever since. So that was, I guess, permanently at the beginning of June. So interesting change. Texas is a very different environment. I'm a Midwesterner, right? So we were aware of the heat. We were aware that the summers got hot here. What no one taught us about or told us about were the bugs. It's like critter roulette in our home every night.
Did you get to shake any of their hands or antenna?
They're that big. They are that big, Mike. And we try to be healthy. We try to do, I try to stay gluten-free, and we try to buy healthy foods and use healthy products. For the most part, we try.
In Texas?
So we went through like every single brand of natural bug spray there was. Our kids were getting eaten alive by the mosquitoes. Finally, we're like, give us the DEET. Like, give us the high concentration stuff. We need to take care of it. So we bent our rules a bit since we've been here.
You got to understand something about bugs in Texas. For those of you that don't know and have never been or don't, if you ever visit there, first off, they're big enough that you can actually shake hands with them. Secondly, if you hit them with anything organic, they're going to look at you and say, thanks for the bath. As you notice, Sean's laughing. It's not a joke.
No, it's really not. I'm laughing because I'm quietly crying inside based on our experience this summer. But no, it's been good, and it's been nice to be closer with my wife's family. She's got a lot of family here, so that's neat. But let's see what else. I've been in entrepreneurship all my life. I grew up in sort of an entrepreneurial household. graduated with a degree in entrepreneurship, started my first business, went bankrupt.
Nice.
So
Perfect.
learned a few
Good start.
valuable lessons along the way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
no entrepreneur is complete without his first failure. Just got to be clear about that.
Thank
guys.
you. That's what I tell myself every night when I go to bed.
Don't we all? It's not complete without it.
Yeah, exactly. But that bankruptcy taught me a lot about myself. I mean, I grew up with this very conventional idea of success, right? You have the big home, the fast cars, the fancy toys. It's all about material possessions, status, keeping up with the Joneses. And when I went bankrupt, I was pursuing my business, but financials. I was pursuing that, growing my net worth at all costs. And I really let go and neglected all the other areas of my life that mattered, that I should have been balancing at the time. So when I went bankrupt, it was kind of my way of losing my identity. I think for the first time in my life, I was in my late 20s. And what I recognized, because I finally took a step back and reflected a bit upon my life. And I think that this pandemic is doing that for so many people.
So here's a question for you. Did you have an identity yet?
My identity was like, I wanted to be a millionaire.
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking that. Did you have an identity yet? If you think about it, because in our 20s, we all think we have one. And I even went through this as a musician, thinking that my identity was to be this big musician star.
Sure.
Until I found out that wasn't going to be.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I for me, and this is just for me, but that's why I asked the question, did you have an identity yet? Did you really have one that was developed enough to actually say, yeah, this is who I am?
I think that's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Love it.
I'm still sorting that out to a certain degree.
I think we all are. I agree.
Yeah. So kind of recognize that, wow, this financial ruin of mine is the least of my problems, right? I'm physically bankrupt. I'm mentally, emotionally bankrupt. I'm spiritually bankrupt. I'm relationally bankrupt. I was in a pretty dark place. And luckily I got some really good guidance from my parents, and I decided to kind of turn my life around and started to focus on, what are the things I need to improve about my life, and what's the right order of these things? What do I work on first? What do I work on second? And almost created a framework or an approach to living more intentionally, because Mike, for the first 3 decades of my life, I was living very unintentionally. And I think I'm being generous with that statement. Yeah. But I came from a place of like, hey, I'm immortal. I'm bulletproof. That attitude that many teenagers carry. I kind of carried that with me. I never shrugged that one off. I kind of carried that through my 20s and started to appreciate the fragility of life, and started to take note and find some gratitude in some of my escapes. Like I had some close calls growing up that never really shook me out of my slumber. And then for whatever reason, this darn bankruptcy was like the thing. It wasn't that I almost lost my life a handful of times. It was like this financial thing that really hit home with me. So I started to get some pretty neat results in my life and in some different areas. And eventually I began teaching and coaching this vehicle for intentional living. And it was recommended to me over and over again for like 6 years. Hey, you should write a book. Now I'm an avid reader. I am now. I wasn't, until I was about 30, but I read about a book a week. And I always thought there's no way I could write a book. I can't do what these great authors do. They take the time to organize and clarify their thoughts. They have the courage to expose their work to public criticism. No way. But of course, like every seed that gets planted, eventually it blossoms. So late last year, I finally had an idea that gave me the confidence to kind of enter into this topic of intentional living. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what intentional living is. And I think it's a big, hairy, broad, scary topic for many of us, myself included.
Yeah, always has been.
Myself included. But this idea gave me just enough confidence where I could say, okay, I could write about it in this way through this lens. And I think this would be highly relevant and highly relatable to so many people. So let me take a shot at it. And so I made that decision at the beginning of this year, started the book in February. It was published late July. And I was very shocked, frankly, at how well it's done, how well it did during like the week of the launch, and how well it's done since then. I feel very blessed that it's done so well.
Did you have some help with that as you were writing through it? Yeah.
Like anything worthwhile,
Yeah.
it took a village, right? So I had an incredible advanced reader base. I had about 125 people, friends and family, clients, things of that nature, that raised their hand and said, we wanted an early version of it. So that was huge. And then of those 125, about, I can't remember, maybe 20 of those people helped me with the actual launch.
Nice.
So they helped me with like 30 days preceding the publication date. So I had a ton of help with it, and great mentors, incredible mentors along the way. I had incredible editors. My family was very supportive. It's interesting, at the beginning of the year, because of the pandemic, I had another business where I was doing business coaching for many years.
Okay.
My wife and I sat down and we were laughing in early January. We're like, our projections this year are just amazing. Our financial projections, like we have, you know, our books look better this year than we did in 19. Like, this is incredible. And I'm thinking, this is the year to write my book. We've got all this financial security. Well, by about late February, I lost 90% of my clients, right? So it's like, holy cow. So all of that security went away. And I thought, you know, everything about the situation was like, now's not the right time, but I tend to redirect that thought when I have it to now's precisely the right time. So now is precisely the right time. What are my options then? What does my life look like then going forward in the next few weeks, months, etc.? Yeah. So glad I did. It was a little bit of a leap of faith, but sometimes you have those burning passions or desires, and you know, you get to a point where you're like, I'd rather move toward this thing than continue procrastinating it, because that just feels so horrible when you're holding it in. I'm a creative person. So it was really helpful for me to get on it, to actually start making some progress towards that goal, because I kind of withheld for so many years.
There was I have a book too. We have to kind of rewrite some of it to address some of the things that are going on today. But even for me, it was like, okay, how do I do this? And my mentor was one that said, if you're going to write, you're going to sit down and just write every day for 3 months straight and just go. And boy, let me tell you, that was hard.
It was. Just
because there were some days where I'd sit there in front of my screen and go, I got nothing. What do I write? And it was interesting. It was still done in the midst of, I think I wrote it back in 16 or 17. I can't remember when I wrote it anymore. And it's like, it was in the midst of a time when it was kind of dark, not as busy, and I still got it done. And I've found that with a few authors, not a ton of them, books get written in the weirdest times, right in the middle, like yours did, right in the middle of a pandemic. One others that I know have gotten written in the middle of a loss of business, or a loss of a loved one, or a loss of this, or times when space opened. And most everybody, I look at more of it, and I'm thinking, was that intended? Was it an intentional opening of space? It kind of leans towards that, like that might have been woo-woo stuff.
It's a good way to look at it. I mean, I was very grateful that I carried through with my decision, because it, you know, during these times of uncertainty, it gave me something to focus on. It gave me something to sink my teeth into. I had a very easy reason to unplug from the news. You know, I had a reason behind why I shouldn't tune into certain things and why I should stay focused over here. So I feel like it was a big blessing, and it happened at a time where, I mean, it's twofold. I agree with what you're saying, and I buy into that, trying to find some empowering meaning through a difficult situation. So number one is it gave me something to focus on during this crazy time of uncertainty that we're all experiencing.
Right.
But number two, I think one of the reasons that the book did so well thus far is because of the pandemic. I don't think if I were to have written this book back in 2018, 4 or 5 months after it published, it would have the sales that it has today in 2020. So I think there's some luck there. I think
there could very well be. I can tell you that books back at 18 probably took a lot more promotion than they would have over the last 4 or 5 months.
It's true.
Yeah. When people are locked down in their own houses and they're sitting there going, what do I do now? a book is definitely a welcome thing, whether that's listening or reading.
Right.
I have friends that are not big readers that they're just like, yeah, I finally finished those 5 books I've been meaning to read. I'm like, 5, dude, you were having a problem with 1. What are you talking
Right.
about?
Yeah. It's
So
a nice escape occasionally, right?
escape, entrance, whatever you want to call it, because in some cases, the novels, they're the escape.
Sure.
Books like
Sure.
ours, they're the entrance into new thinking.
Sure.
And I think they're both appropriate. I mean, I would never discount one from the other. Sometimes you need that creative escape. Sometimes you need that entrance into some new type of thinking, and not just, not just echo chamber thinking either.
Right.
I've read other books that are pretty controversial, and I've had to really stop and take a look and go, wow, where does this perspective come from?
Sure.
But it's I think it's part of humanness to be able to stop for a second and take the written word into mind and really ponder it and really understand what's going on, whether that be creative or non-creative or nonfiction, if you will. Yeah, I'm very happy for your success, man. Congratulations for one.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you're on the Amazon's bestseller lists. The subject of intentional living, how did that just come, like, as a means of just evolution over time, or was it just something that just kind of came through mentors, and how did that all piece together as a system?
Yeah. I think some people might call that, a purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
I think some people might call it leading a life of significance. I just landed on, intentional living. I've been a student of many books over the years. And one of the books that I read that had a real profound impact on me was The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware.
Wow.
And she was a palliative care nurse, and she worked with her patients in the final weeks of their lives. And after hundreds of patients and years of palliative care experience, she recognized very common patterns and very common threads with the conversations that she was having. So she wrote a book on it. And the number one regret that she heard most often was, I wish I had the courage to live a life that was true to myself and not one that others expected of me. And when I read that, I'm like, I am a product of conventional wisdom right now. I am a product of conventional success.
Yep.
I'm a product of my religion, society, culture, upbringing, parents. It's just my environment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I look at conventional wisdom like we all need some training wheels.
Sure. Sure.
But I arrived at a point in my life where that no longer served me. And I had to go for the very first time, Mike, and define and identify what it is I wanted out of my life, what it was that I wanted my life to be about, and how I wanted to show up in the world.
Right.
And no one necessarily taught me how to do that growing up. I always felt like most people had their own agendas, like I can count on less than 5 fingers, like true guides that I've met in my life that helped me discover my own truth, my own authentic answers to certain questions. And their only agenda was to help me achieve mine.
Right.
And I wanted to write from that perspective of the guide with this book. And it's how I approach coaching. And it's what I do in my online course. I just want to help people discover their own answers and to find clarity in their own truth. So intentional living for me became a way of life. I always say that, the pivotal moment in my life, or the shift, is when I shifted from conventional living to intentional living, and all of a sudden my entire life changed. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. For a while, I was reading books that had to do with like religion and Christianity, and they kind of took that angle at intentional living. And that wasn't really what I was looking for.
Right.
I know that is for a lot of people, but that wasn't necessarily for me. But I made an association with intentional living, and I'm like, maybe this thing isn't for me. And then I read some books like Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention.
Yep.
And like I read the first 100 pages, Mike, I'm like, I don't have a clue what any of this is about. Like my little brain can't understand any. So I kind of associated intentional living with law of attraction and some woo-woo stuff, as you just called it, right?
Yeah.
Which it also really wasn't. Like, I just wanted a practical path to help me go from like this place of, insignificance to like in a place of significance, right? Like I wanted to live more intentionally based on.
I need to write that down. That was really good. Insignificance to a place of significance, or
That's right.
insignificance.
Yeah. And that's what my online, I mean, that's what the book does. That's what the transformation that the book or the course or my acceleration program, anything I do, the transformation I'm trying to deliver to the reader or to a student or to a client of mine is that transformation from insignificance to in significance, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that's what I wanted. And I had a hard time finding it. And I took a lot of personal development programs, all of which were amazing.
Sure.
But I never felt that they were flexible enough to custom tailor to my needs, to my exact circumstances, to my situation, to my phase of life. So what I wanted to do with this was create something that was moldable. It's flexible. You can take it, make it your own, and run with it based on wherever you are. And that's some of the feedback I've been getting was like, wow, this is very relevant for me right now in life. And wow, this is highly relatable. I use the metaphor of school in my book, which I don't look fondly on my formal education. It was an awkward time in my life. I was a horrible student.
I think it was an awkward time for many of us, especially as,
Right?
especially as entrepreneurs that look at the teacher and go, the hell's that got to do with anything?
I really struggled. I think
we all
that
did.
was the idea I carried forward. So the idea was like, hey, I've been able to get some really incredible results that I'm so thankful for in my life over the past decade. If I were to write about this approach of mine, the lessons in this approach were very similar to the foundational and very fundamental lessons that I learned in school. Didn't recognize them at the time, didn't realize they were there, but in hindsight, wow, there were some things about my experiences in school that really helped me now in the real world.
Yeah.
So for the first quick example I'll give you is like subject areas. Back in school,
Right.
we had 5-6 subject areas we had to be responsible at all times. We couldn't pass a class and fail the rest.
Right.
We wouldn't progress to the next plate. Great. We couldn't do well in 5 classes, but fail 1, same net effect.
Yeah.
So somehow, some way back in school as students, we had to be in this constant state of balancing.
Right.
So in the real world now, you have life areas and the stakes are a lot higher in the real world. In my 20s, I went all out and pursued career, business, financial gain, and I lost everything.
Yeah.
My health suffered, my relationships suffered. I mean, everything about my life, I was a hot mess. I still am some days.
Yeah, I think we all are.
Some days I still am.
That's why there's coffee.
And podcasts.
And podcasts. Absolutely.
But so if you could take that lesson of, hey, there's more than one thing I need to pay attention to and continually improve. And it's not about this myth of work-life balance. It's about being in a constant state of balancing. It's a verb. It's not a noun.
Yep.
If you took that into the real world and you said, what are all the areas of my life that matter the most? We have health, we have wealth, we have relationships, we have all these sub areas. Like, it's on us to discover what those areas are for ourselves. Right. So that's kind of like the first chapter in my book. It's like, hey, let's identify the targets in your life here so that you know what's at stake. Right. So that you understand what you might need to be continually paying attention to and improving over time. Okay. Right.
Have like 1,000,001 thoughts running through my head just after that statement, but and we're gonna take a short pause for about 30 seconds, and when we come back, we're gonna get into the next section. But keep that in mind, because one of the things that you triggered is an old story of probably one of my, in my head, possibly most remembered professors from one of my first classes in college. Of whom the class in and of itself, I could not care about the relevance of. But something he said in our first day in his class has stuck with me for as long as I've lived. And
I'm hooked.
Yeah,
I'm hooked.
I'll explain the significance of it when we come back. So, guys, we're going to take a short 30-second pause, and we'll be right back. And we're back here, Java Chat, with Sean Rosensteel, talking about intentional living. Before we left, I mentioned that I wanted to share a story about one of my professors that I had in college when I was first, years and years and years ago. I was attending a local community college. One of my classes was an economics class. And now everybody's going to go, well, you said it was insignificant. Well, yeah. because at the time I was a musician. It was insignificant to me at the time. It was probably one of the classes that I remember the least, but the professor I remember very well. And the reason for that is, first off, he was an immigrant from China that understood economics very well. And was funny because he was relating cultural differences between how we are in the US and how they are in China. And I'm when I'm talking culture, I'm talking base culture, Chinese culture, tea and food and how you act and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that stuck to me was, it's very interesting to us that here in the States, you raise a toast and say, here's to your health, but you drink it. And I for some reason, for years, that stuck with me. And I was like, what's the real intent behind it? If that's a reality, why are we telling somebody, here's to your health, but I'm going to drink it? So it was a joke for many years. But at the same time, it was also very clear. If you're going to wish somebody something well, shouldn't you be giving them rather than taking it onto yourself? If you think about that, there's a lot of times where that actually happens. The intention is not enough. You know, when you're in the case of this, you're intentional living. You're giving at the same time that you're intending. You're not just. I'm assuming this. You're not just living with the intent to do something. You're actually intending and doing something. And from that standpoint, it's like, yeah, if I tell somebody, here's to your health, I'm giving it to them. If I tell somebody, here's to your financial well-being, I'm giving them that. I'm going to give that to them. If I'm intending somebody good knowledge, I'm giving them a book, or I'm giving them an Audible. I'm giving them something. I'm giving them a website. I'm giving them somebody to go and follow that's doing what it is that they're looking for. I think that as an actual intent, not just a good intention. We all know where that one leads, but as an actual intent to share, I think that's worth a lot more to our fellow human in general. I don't care where you're from on the planet, but I think having that as an actual intent probably will be of much greater value to whoever it is that we're sharing with at that moment in time. Does that make sense?
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And what comes to mind, Mike, is the law of reciprocity.
Absolutely.
So you carry yourself that way, you show up in the world that way, and you have this little thing called the law of reciprocity on your side.
Yep.
Right. And I've always thought, there's so many, I think, misconceptions around purpose. I know I've struggled for many years with purpose. I used to ask myself incessantly, like, what's the purpose of my life? What am I doing here? Where's this all going? And what I've discovered, I think, is like, if you're out there looking for, like, just give me a tactic I can put into play now. It's like,
it's the male fix-it kicked in right there.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Just give it to me. What is it?
Just show me. Let me do it.
Yeah. Well, I've always found that, like, the most meaningful kind of purpose is always, always, always when you're in service to others.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely.
If I'm ever stuck or, in my head about something, like, it's like, how fast can I go do something for my wife? Mm-hmm. How fast can I give to my kids? How fast can I go, make sandwiches and deliver them to the homeless, or whatever it is? And the moment you do that, everything changes, because you're in that state of abundance and generosity and giving. And it's just, your whole world changes from that. And for those of you who are stuck, like I once was, and that I occasionally still do, is like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? 2 tiny little words changed everything for me, Mike. And it was when I added right now to the end of that line of questioning, when instead of asking myself, what is my purpose? Because when you ask yourself a bad question, your brain will never find that answer, right? Or you'll get a bad one.
You'll get a bad answer or an incorrect answer that runs you off into another. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So what helped me was, like, by adding right now. So what is my purpose right now? Like, it grounded me in the present moment. And that line of questioning helped me refocus on the activity at hand. Right. I don't know if you're familiar with, like, Eckhart Tolle's work, sure. The Power of Now, right? Yep. It's like, he talks about how the future is nothing more than future present moments that haven't taken place yet.
Right.
The past is nothing more than present moments that have already occurred. And all you have is the present moment. All you have is the now. So that question always helped me just reground myself in the moment and refocus on, well, what's important just right now? Mm-hmm. Right now, like we're here together. We're both present, having a fun conversation. We're not worried about what we're going to have for lunch. Yeah, you're in Vegas, so you probably haven't eaten lunch yet. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about what's going on at 5 p.m. tonight. We're here.
Yep.
We're right. And we can, hopefully listeners can feel that. Hopefully we can feel that from one another. So it's like you have, and then you have the power of the compound effect also on your side, which is like you have stacks and days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, et cetera. You have stacks of present moments, truly present moments. Those things add up and they compound over time.
Yeah. To round out the, because earlier I said it was a class that I didn't really see any value in at the time. I do understand economics. In fact, I got very interested in economics much later in life.
When it mattered.
When it actually mattered. Yeah, when it started becoming really relevant to me. And by the way, that wasn't just this year. It was like years ago, back in the early 2000s, when I started looking at going, oh, I should have listened to that class. Holy crap. So just so everybody knows, it wasn't that I mean, yes, I was the rebel without a cause. I wasn't the kid in the back of the room. That's the funny thing. I always sat somewhere near the front.
Did you?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I was the kid you would expect in the back of the class that never paid attention. I actually sat near the front of the class and never paid attention. That's
you just had no shame.
I just had there was no shame in my game.
Less.
I didn't give a rip. You know, some of my professors too, they used to get a kick out of me. I had one who was a trial attorney. It was a critical thinking class. And guys, I'm just sharing at this point, just for fun. But this was another one of my inspirational moments. Was we would sit in class, he would bring up a subject, and then he would hold discussion, and the whole class would go nuts on each other. Everybody just arguing and throwing things back and forth. And I'm sitting here looking at everybody going, I thought this was the critical thinking class. Why is everybody getting mad? And I literally got on the phone with that professor. I said, hey, I just wanted to thank you. I get the feeling you're dealing like with this a lot in your classes. He goes, I want to thank you for calling me and giving me that validation. You're like the only student I've ever had in the 4 years of teaching that really understands what critical thinking is about. Everybody else is being emotional. I'm like, I don't get it though. Guys were being emotional. It didn't make sense to me why they were doing that. I'm like, guys, personal experience isn't fact. That's a personal fact. That's an experience. That's different. The facts of a matter lie with, the facts are the facts. They lie within a situation. Whatever the facts are, that's what you have to look at. Not what happened to your brother, not what happened to your cousin, not what you think is actually right and what's right, what you think is actually wrong. But, you know, we're talking about law here. What does the law say? Well, if the law says this, then what are the facts around that law? Well, then this is the outcome that needs to occur. Oh, no, that can't be. This what happened. I'm like, so yeah, it's later on in life, things became very relevant and I got back with it and wow, there's
sounds like you had some wisdom back then in your early years, huh?
Well, and here's the reason why is that because I even in music, there are creative logisticians that most people don't realize exist. When you have really serious musicians that really know music and know theory and know their creative side is beautiful, but don't ever get into an argument of logic with them. They will logic you to death and you will not have a recourse in being emotional because they'll just look at you and go, you just don't get it. Here's the facts. Here's what's really working. Here's what's not working. And that blew me away as a musician who was just a kid that, you know, 2 questions every day, go to the beach or my friend's house and go play music. These guys were like, no, there's more to it than that. And here's how it really works. And this is where you're wrong. And I didn't like hearing that.
Right. Yeah, no one does.
No, it's just, and I really didn't like hearing that. And it was me rebelling. And they looked at me one day and they go, look at what you got. In fact, here, look at what you don't got. And look at where you're at.
Results.
Yeah. And they said, now look where I'm at and look what I can do. I said, it's because I've done this. One of my best mentors in music was actually a finance manager in a bank, making well in six figures, and this was back in the 80s, early 80s, late 70s. He was making six figures, doing very well. One of his buddies came in, looked at him with his feet up on his desk and said, "What the hell are you doing in here? You belong out there playing music and you know it." 2 weeks later, he quit and he went back to music because he knew he was right. The guy was right. He didn't belong in a bank. Even though he knew he could do it, he could sell ice to an Eskimo if he wanted to. But as a real musician, and by the way, he carries 2 degrees, one in big band arrangement and one in composition. And he's also, if I remember correctly, still one of the only ones certified in Pro Tools that does not have a PhD, a level 4 Pro Tools trainer. He's one of those guys. So bringing that back to you, who are some of the people that inspired you to keep moving forward? Like as you were learning your purpose at that moment, who were some of those people that gave you that boost?
Sure. I think the first people that come to mind are my folks. When I went bankrupt, I had included some money that I had owed to them in the bankruptcy. Yeah.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Wait.
So
let me retract that. Not nice. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, I better call them and give them a heads up. They're going to get a letter from the government soon.
Yeah.
So I made the call, and this was guidance that forever changed my life. My dad said something he had said to me 100 times before. Never, I wasn't ready for it, never clicked, but he said, "Sean, no one is responsible for you but you." And then my mom chimed in and said, "I think it's time to find a quiet place and figure things out for yourself." And I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah.
For 10 years now. I finally had the readiness, I suppose. I was finally in enough pain and discomfort to really hear those words and listen and take their guidance to heart. So they've just been an incredible force in my life. And one of the reasons why I keep going is I don't want to disappoint them again, because I grew up disappointing them over and over and over. And I'm blessed that they're still here. And so one of my reasons is to not disappoint them again, to not let them down again. And that really keeps me going. Let's see. Wayne Dyer has been just a huge mentor in my life.
Awesome.
I started reading his books probably 7 or 8 years ago. And just some of the things that he's come out with have just really touched me. I mean, his whole phrase of, I'd rather be kind than right, for example, just so simple. But when I'm with people who I would normally perceive as difficult, or having different views, or having a strong argument, just remembering that, I don't need to do anything here. I'd rather be kind than right. And let's just let this person have their say today, just keeps me at bay. And his whole thing about, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, and shifting perspectives. And his work has just profoundly made a difference for me. And let's see, Napoleon Hill, big student of the Think and Grow Rich methodology. Awesome. I've been studying that since high school, although I didn't really understand it, in high school. I think for the first 10 years I was reading that book, Mike, my whole aim was financial. Yeah. And I finally came
that's how the book comes off. When you're that young, that's the only thing you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, riches don't necessarily need to connect back to your financial area. Riches can mean anything through any area. And it's like, when you look at the book through that lens, Think and Grow Happy, Think and Grow Physically Healthy, Think and Grow Relationally. I mean, when you can actually take a different perspective through that book, no matter what it is that you desire in life, and it's not just financial gain, it can be anything. It can be a mindset, a habit, an attitude, deeper relationships, whatever it is. The book opens up. And I think that's what The Secret is, by the way. He references The Secret in the preface.
It's interesting. There's the original manuscript, the one that is almost impossible to find these days, has certain parts inside that are italicized and certain parts inside that are in bold. And they're intentionally done that way to reveal that secret, because you won't find it in the regular print. Any of the normal editions, you won't see it. One of the things that I noted from that book is the difference between, as you mentioned, rich and wealthy. Think and Grow Rich, by definition, thinks material. But if you really read the book, and I know you have, if you really read that book, you'll notice it's Think and Grow Wealthy, because of the different types of wealth that there are, and not just material. It covers every aspect of life. I mean, if you really read the book, you'll note that there are different aspects addressed in every story that Napoleon shares. And if come on, guys, think about it. This was a guy who, as a kid, the only thing that was paid for were his expenses. Everything else, he didn't get paid. There was no salary to that deal. Carnegie basically told him, I'm gonna send you around. You're gonna go talk to a few people. You'll come back and you write a book. Had no idea what was gonna happen when all of that came together. And the only bargaining chip that was offered was, I'll pay for your brother's college. That was it. For those that don't know that story. Think about it though. Your book obviously tags into it. Intentional living. That's exactly what he talks about throughout the whole book, is living intentionally. I think that's got to be a part of the secret.
A big inspiration for me. I mean, I've always said, like, I can go back to that place of bankruptcy and I can still have my wife and my 3 kids and be the wealthiest man on the planet.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would ever look at things that way without those teachings. I don't think I would ever look at life and loss that same way if I didn't have that conditioning.
Yeah.
By studying that so often. So that was certainly a big inspiration for me. And you're right, it is about intentional living. Because I think for me, like, I was looking at the science behind the law of attraction, like, because the law of attraction, when I first learned about it, it was too out there for me to comprehend. And I wasn't into that. I wasn't into the religious sort of things. I was looking for some sort of a middle ground. And I did a ton of research on this, Mike. And eventually I found something in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Remember those? That was the internet.
That was our internet. Well,
that was
my internet back in the day. Yeah, we had a set.
Yeah. So in that Encyclopedia Britannica, in the physiology section, it talked about the reticular activation system. Oh. This function in our brains. And when I read it, it was wild. And again, my tiny little brain had a hard time understanding this, but our 5 senses are perceiving 11 million bits of information every second of the day. So, like, we've already received 50 million bits of information through our 5 senses since I said that.
Yep.
But our conscious minds can only reach out and pick out and filter 50 of those 11 million bits every second. So this function in our brain, we're the only species on the planet that has this, what I would call a technology, this reticular activation system. So that helps us filter and store information coming from our 5 senses that is relevant to either our ability to survive or thrive.
Right.
So the moment I read that, I'm like, okay, this is starting to make, I need a little science at times to understand things. And I get it. No wonder why felt like I was going through the motions, drifting, falling apart at the seams, because I never identified and defined what it was that I wanted out of life.
Right.
And therefore, while I believe my environment is abundant, I was missing it. And what's interesting is once I activated that piece of technology, I've always said, like, the most powerful app in the world is sitting right between our ears. And all we have to do is activate it. And the moment we do, everything shifts. And all of a sudden, the right solutions show up. The right people magically appear. The finances finally come through. Like, all these, what seem to be miraculous things occur. And it's because we actually took the time to define and decide what it was we want. So for me, that's what a lot of Think and Grow Rich is conditioning your mind to start to look for what you want, or start to look for the good in situations versus looking for the bad.
Right.
So many years ago, I'm like, it's so easy to get offended. Like, it's like the new cool thing is for all of us to just walk around and be offended at everyone, everything. And I made a decision years ago, like, that's not how I'm going to live my life. Like, I'm going to be the guy who doesn't get easily offended. I'm going to be the guy who lets people be and just lives his life. Like, for me, I just want to feel good. I just want to feel happy. I want peace of mind. Like, these are all things I value.
Yep.
And if I walk around focusing on all the things that are wrong, I feel
That's all
horrible.
you're gonna ever. Yeah, it's all you're ever gonna find too. If that's
And then that shows up.
Yep.
It shows up in my environment.
Yep.
So I kind of realized that I was asking myself this question every day. Well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this person? What's wrong? And the moment I shifted and said, well, wait a minute. Well, if I could find what's right about that, what's good about this? All of a sudden my focus shifts to what's good versus what's bad. And I live from that place, and it changes everything, because your brain, once you focus on, like, you want proof, your brain looks for proof. So when you make a decision or when you have a belief, it's faith 101, right? It's like when you have a belief in something, your brain scans the environment and it looks to prove those beliefs. So you got to be careful with that. And I think that's what Think and Grow Rich did for me, is it helped me start to focus on some of the things that I really wanted out of my life. And it's certainly an inspiration for my book too.
Oh, sure. I wouldn't doubt that a bit. Tag on to what you just said. That same attorney that was our critical thinking, he sent us home on our first day, said, your brain looks for proof of what it is that you think is right.
Bingo.
So he says, so here's a challenge. On your way home, find all the Mercedes-Benz. He says, now watch. Tomorrow, I'm going to ask you how many other kinds of cars you saw. You're not going to be able to remember any of them, but I bet you'll remember exactly how many Mercedes you saw. Sure enough. How many guys saw Honda today? How many of you guys saw a Toyota? A couple hands went up. How about Mercedes? Every hand went up. It's like,
it's that technology
you'll find
at work.
It's
why you go looking for, you're in the market for a new car, same make, model, vehicle, color, everything. You see it everywhere. You want some new shoes? All of a sudden, everybody walking down the street has those same shoes in the right color. Yeah.
It's amazing what our brain is actually capable of doing. There's somebody that has been doing some stuff around Think and Grow Rich, a guy by the name of Paul Martinelli. And you mentioned that you've hung out with him virtually. You've hung out with him a little bit to find out a little bit more about him. He's one of those guys that's definitely an inspiration kind of person.
Amazing.
And knows Think and Grow Rich inside out. He's run programs on them and stuff like that. What's a story you can share of inspiration from that?
Yeah. Paul's an amazing guy. So's Roddy is amazing. They run the Empowered Living community.
Yeah.
And I think they've done 2 or 3, Mike.
I believe at least 2.
Study series.
Yeah.
So I tapped into the last one that they did. I think it was last year.
Yes, it was actually. I missed that one, but yes, they did.
Yeah, and that was awesome. I mean, that to me is like a lifelong study, right? It's for me, it's an annual read. It's one of my annual reads. And it's one of those things where you read through it, you're in a different phase of life. You have different things you're focused on in life, and you always pick something new up along the way. So that study that they did was incredible, because it certainly came from a different perspective than I had, right?
Yeah.
So very valuable. And I had the privilege of going on and going live with some training this year.
Nice.
This must have been maybe a month or 2 ago. They invited me into the community, and they kind of gave me the stage for about 15 minutes, which was a lot of fun. And Paul introduced me. And of course, I'm like, Paul's introducing me. This is amazing. It was such a cool experience. And those guys are so genuine, and they're so generous. And I look at Paul and Roddy as more of my mentors.
Absolutely.
No question about it.
Yeah. Guys, it's people like that. It's like same thing with my book. When I asked Ben to write the foreword for my book, and he's like, you got it. I was like, that's it? I mean, it's that simple? He's like, yeah, you got it. You want me to write the foreword? No problem. We don't always give ourselves enough credit, I think, is half of it. When we don't realize that what we're trying to do is contribute to the world.
Right. And
then all of a sudden it's like, so-and-so has introduced me. So-and-so is doing this for me. And it's like, how, what, am I that significant? Well, yes. And what you probably don't realize is you always have been. You just didn't know it.
That's right. What is it, like 1 in 400 million odds of being born?
Exactly. As a human.
That's speculation, but
but even then, just even the speculative odds are insanely against us.
Yeah.
And yet, here we are. So
And
why
we've
aren't we?
arrived at this exact time in this exact location. There must be
There be a reason.
a reason behind it, right?
So why are you sitting on your butt and doing nothing?
And if you're out there wondering what it is, then that's your purpose.
Yeah.
Your purpose is to discover why you're here.
Yep.
Like, there you go. There's a clue. And I think a lot of people don't, like, you look at Bronnie Ware's work, and I opened my book with one of my favorite lines from the death of Ivan Ilyich. And in the final moments of his life, I'm one of those really weird mortality motivated people, Mike. Like, I'm constantly thinking about my death.
That's a good book, though.
But
it
keeps me, on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But he was in the final moments, and he's like, what if my whole life has been wrong? So we're experiencing these regrets at the end of our lives. And to the degree that we can minimize those types of questions, so we look back and we have confidence and certainty today, is so important. So getting back to what we were talking about, because that's a rabbit hole in and of itself.
Yep.
I think that a lot of us, if this is true, if we reach the end and we have this regret, if we're thinking about it today, that's the tap on the shoulder. That might be the U-turn we're looking for. If we know, if we're sitting here knowing that we're going through the motions, we're playing small, we're withholding, we could be contributing on a greater level, not making the most of our God-given talents, abilities, wasting our time, like, those are signals.
Yep.
Those are some signs that you're being called. You're being tapped on the shoulder. And there's so many people are like, well, I want to live more intentionally, Sean, but I didn't go bankrupt. It's like, well, that has nothing to do with it. I used that event in my life as my wake-up call. I did a little introspection, and I found some meaning in that difficulty, and I used it as fuel for my future. You can use this pandemic. You can get out of bed, stub your toe, and use that.
Yep.
Yep. Because I used to sit back and I'm like, so many of these incredible people in the world, like, they had an accident, they lost their limbs, they lost a child, they're like, oh my gosh. And I played small, and I didn't do what I really wanted to do, and I didn't contribute at the level I knew I was capable and meant to contribute on, because I was like, I don't have that. I don't have that big. Well, you don't need it. If you have a feeling that you're holding back and there's something that you've been procrastinating, like, that's your sign. Or if you're not sure what your purpose is, like, well, then your purpose is to go seek it. I got to the point where it's like, I was thinking purpose had to smack me like a ton of bricks in the face one day when I walked out of the house. And I'm thinking, if I wait for this, something really bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, because look at all these people with these significant purposes. Like, they went through some serious struggle.
Yep.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I don't want that to happen to me. And who is the Roman poet who said, like, death twitches my ear, live, I'm coming. Live, he says, I'm coming. That just, like, I have chills just thinking about that.
Of course, now you do that, I got to go look it up.
Yeah, it's just one word. I'm drawing a blank here. I know he was like a Roman poet, 80 BC maybe.
Virgil.
Thank you.
I knew the name, and I'm just like, it's simple. I'm gonna be stupid here. Virgil.
It's okay. We're in this together.
Damn it.
Yeah, damn it. So anyways, I think that's enough. That's all you need, because a lot of us live complacently, and we kind of go through the motions and we drift, and then we make it to the end and we're like, oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
I had this gift called life. I had this one opportunity. We missed it. So I think if you're feeling that way, that's enough. And you can find meaning. We've all had our struggles. We all have stories to tell. It's just, we haven't done that reflection. We haven't taken enough time to do that introspection to say, what did I learn about that challenging time in my life?
Exactly.
What did this struggle teach me? And that's the story. And you probably have hundreds of them.
It's interesting that most people never take that moment. There's a lot of talk about reflection and stuff. And I don't know that there's enough explanation around that, what it means and what it is that you do in reflection to understand all of those lessons that come through. I swear there's a bunch of people walking around that have no idea they've had 15 lessons in a day, and they don't stop. They don't stop to just take a moment and go, well, what happened today that was such a lesson for me? What did I learn? Did I learn? Is there something to learn? every one of those questions is valid. And if you haven't taken the time at the end of the day, I don't care how busy you are, whether you're a student, an entrepreneur, business professional, I don't care. If you haven't taken the time at the end of the day to at least take an assessment of what happened, you're missing out on all the lessons that life's trying to tap you on the shoulder with. The very things that you were just saying, coming back on the back of you, going, "Hey, here, this is better." But
Right.
you don't want to miss this one. You know,
Yeah.
there is a flow that's happening, trying to help you get to your next space, your next spot. Pay attention, because somebody's gonna need it.
I think that's an important, that's a mindset, or I don't love the word mindset because it's being used so much often, but that's an important attitude, I think, to carry with you,
Yeah, yeah,
is
that's
that
a good way
life
to
is
call it.
happening for me,
Yep, not
not
to
to
me.
me.
Yep, that's true.
And I have to just slow down and take a little bit more in
Yep,
and stop. But it's hard to do, isn't it, Mike? Because it's like we're in the information age. We get
everything's
bombarded
rolling at
with
about 1 million. Yep.
thousands of messages a day, and it's not easy right now.
What was that meme? Life is running at 50 WTFs a minute. And
Yeah.
that is absolutely true. When the age of information first became available, so many people got so busy, and overwhelm was instantaneous. Nobody knew what to do with it.
Right.
And it hasn't slowed down. It's only gotten worse. People have gotten used to it, but they haven't gotten used to how to deal with the overwhelm,
Hmm.
because they're still allowing it to happen. It's still
Right.
happening on the daily.
Right.
But with everything that you got, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. It's time for us to take one more break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the book, the system, where people can find you and all that kind of stuff. We'll be right back, guys, in about 30 seconds. It feels weird. I just said, and we're back. And we're back. Here at Java. I was literally saying that before I turned the recording back on. Shucks. Sitting here with Sean Rosensteel, best-selling author on Amazon for The School of Intentional Living. Last section, we talk about, what's going on now. Sean kind of alluded to, didn't allude. He basically shared with us where he's at. He's actually in Dallas. You're still coaching, I would assume.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you have your practice is based around this intentional living model that you've evolved and created.
Yep.
How long has that been running?
About 6 years. Publicly this year. I mean, I was privately coaching by referral only, started with friends and family.
Sure.
Who were like, "Hey, what are you doing over there?"
Yeah.
And then it got into some referrals, and then eventually I was doing corporate groups and things of that nature, which I still am occasionally, but for the most part now, I'm promoting my online course, which is done really well. I've been very grateful for some of the results I've seen, some of the transformation the students have been getting. I still do offer coaching. I don't promote that much at all.
Right.
Typically some students go through and they're like, "Hey, we want to work one-on-one." So if I have
Yeah.
spots, I can do that. And then about once a quarter, slowing down a bit, maybe once a quarter now, I'm doing group coaching, like what I call an acceleration program.
Cool.
Where we essentially take down, what are the 12 modules in the course in a 6-week period, meet twice a week via Zoom, typically groups of 8 to 12, somewhere around that size. But I don't think I'm promoting those either right now, just kind of slowing down end of the year and figuring out, what's next for next year.
Right on. I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about your next group when that comes up, because I have a few people that would probably be interested.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Not unlike myself.
Thank you.
Do you have any more new books coming out on the horizon? Anything else coming out? Or?
Mike, I got 8.
Oh, is that all?
I got 8 ideas, and it's so difficult for me to withhold. I love the writing process. I mean, as much as a challenge as that was, there's like 6. I look at writing and publishing a book like there are 6 main steps or phases that you have to work through. That's in my experience and through all the training I had. And I look at that writing phase, like that was such a great experience because you're challenging yourself.
Yeah.
Everything is so challenging, but there's so much growth in all of that activity. So I would love to write my next book. I know what it is. I have an outline. I can't wait to get my butt back in the seat. But I also feel like this first book of mine is important. And I feel like I have to stand my post for a little while. Yeah. And I'll probably stay put and continue to promote the book and continue to enroll students in the course and continue to do some coaching from time to time, just because I think that's got a long runway.
Sure.
And I think that it's important enough to invest more time in it. As much as I want to go off and write that next book, I feel like I owe a responsibility to this first one to continue the tour, so to speak.
Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. And I think a lot of people will appreciate the fact that you are going to stand the post for a while, because I think that's a platform where a lot of people need to catch up, because there's still a lot of people out there that haven't come even close to some of the things that we've discussed. Here's a question: Who's a good candidate for reading this book?
I think so first and foremost, this is a broad topic, and as much training and coaching that I received told me that I have to identify a niche, or I have to identify an ideal reader.
Yeah.
Like for me, writing this book to keep me authentic, honest, in integrity, transparent. Like I wrote this book for my future children, because I've been in that place, what Viktor Frankl calls the existential vacuum, right? I've been in that place that is void of meaning, that is purposeless. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I wrote this book with my future kids in mind, because I figured, if they're ever in a place in life and they're as lost as I once was, and still am from time to time, I want to give them a little bit of a map out of the woods.
Yeah.
They'll probably never read it. But that's kind of who I had in mind, right? But right now, out of all the feedback I've gotten since July, the great Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung talks about the stages of life, the morning, the afternoon, and the evening of our lives. And what I'm finding is it's these people in the afternoon of their lives that are still using the same playbook from the morning of their lives, that this book is really attracting, because this is a playbook for the afternoon. And it's people who are feeling like they're going through the motions, they're discontent in one or more areas of their life, and they've kind of arrived in a place where they're thinking, I thought I'd have greater health by now. I thought I'd have deeper relationships by now. I thought I'd have more wealth by now. I'm not where I want to be.
Right.
And I know there's so much more. So I need to make a big shift.
Yeah.
So I feel like this book is for people who are making that shift. They're going from maybe blind ambition to more meaningful ambition in their life, or they're going from, hey, I've done everything everyone has told me to do. I've pleased everyone, and I've never actually taken the time to live life on my own terms. Not that that's an egotistical thing. It's just like, I need to start living life the way that I believe, live it in a way that, it was designed for me.
Yeah.
So I look at it as kind of a playbook for people who have arrived in the afternoon of their life and they're not satisfied with where they are, and they're looking for just a new approach where they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to learn anything new. They can kind of take this, plug and play it, and just move forward with it. And it's, as we mentioned, it's very relatable. It's really simple.
Yeah.
I grew up, my dad just drilled this home. He was always like, Sean, complexity is the enemy of success. Keep things simple. Right. So this is really simple, and it's a short read. It's like 125 pages if you don't include front and back matter. I mean, we stripped.
That is a short read.
It's a short read. We stripped. My editors did a great job. It was a little over 200 pages, and they came and just hurt my feelings.
I could not have hoped. I wish I had your editors. My book isn't even, and my book's way more than that. And but I think though, zooming in on solid content that is playbook, because mine's is more stories and stuff like that. It's there's relatable guidelines and philosophies in it, but it's not like that. Maybe I should rewrite that book. There's a thought.
You know what though? Different strokes for different folks. I have a lot of people saying, hey, thanks for, keeping all the fluff out. Yeah. But then I have, a handful of other folks who are like, where are all the case studies and testimonials?
Oh yeah. And that's
like,
yeah.
But personally, Mike, like I'll read a book and I'm like, half of this book was chocked full of like self-serving for the author testimonials that, like, I get it. I don't need another. So I told that to my editors. I said, I just want this to be straightforward, to the point.
Here's
no
how it works.
Fluff.
Yeah.
And then they hurt my feelings and gave me that result by taking so much out of it. Yeah. But I would do it the same way again. It's just a real quick, and it's one of those things where, and I suggest this to the reader right up front. Look, just take a pass through this. read this book cover to cover. It will only take you a couple hours.
Yeah.
And if you like it, if it's in alignment, if it meets you where you're at, which is my goal here.
Yep.
Then if you buy into it and you believe me and you share my values and my beliefs and you like this, it's for you, then go back with a fine-tooth comb and actually execute the assignments at the end of the chapters.
Yep.
Otherwise it's not worthwhile to dig in. It's like, well, we don't even know where we're going here. So
Yeah.
I always like to do that 30,000 foot view, get a lay of the land, so to speak.
Yep.
And identify, is this congruent with where I am in life? Do I buy into this or not? So I always recommend take a quick pass, make sure you like it, and make sure you trust me as your guide. And then if you do, come back through and all the materials are there for you.
I think you're the first one that's actually said that in all the podcasts that I've done, because I've had a lot of authors here, and that makes absolute sense. When you're taking a look at a book, it needs to be congruent with what you are looking for.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned, one of the biggest time savers I've learned, Mike, is like, we're in the information age. There is no shortage. We have the world's wisdom in the palm of our hands.
It's insane.
99% of it's not great.
Yeah.
But there's some incredible teachers out there.
Yeah.
And all teachers today hold office hours. They're 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
So when I talk about congruency, like I used to buy programs and buy, books, whatever it was, any sort of learning material in different modalities. I used to buy it and I'd start to apply it, but then I would get off track, or then I would stop, or then I would fall short, or I lacked follow through. And I was like, why? I need this thing. I want to make more money. I have to make more money. Why do I keep starting and stopping? And what I recognize is that if I don't have if the congruency factor isn't there with the person teaching it, I don't believe that person and I'll stop.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we connect with teachers, authors, thought leaders, online course developers, seminar, whatever it is. We plug in and tap into information where we feel congruency with that teacher. The relevancy component's easy. It's like, why would I go learn how to care for orchids if orchid care isn't relevant? I don't do that. It's not relevant. So the relevancy factor is easy. Usually when we have a need, we seek out a solution and we find it.
Yeah.
But what's important is that we have that congruency factor with the person delivering the information, because it's rapport.
Yeah.
If we don't feel that, or if the author writes in a style, like I've read a few books where I'm 5-10 pages in, the subject matter fascinates me, but I'm like, I'm about to vomit. This author's writing style and the ego that this author I can't, it just repels me.
Yeah.
So I stop. I don't try to force myself through it. I know I'm not going to apply anything because I don't have the belief in the person who did it.
Yeah.
So for me, that's been a huge wake up call, oh, got it. And now rather than when I look for solutions, I also look into the person designing the solution to make sure that I buy in wholeheartedly. And that belief isn't going to stop halfway through the application process. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and we all want different modalities. We talk about, it's not about reading the book. Maybe you're a listener, maybe your preference is audio and you're a better listener than you are a reader. Great. Grab an audiobook. There's it's why I have an online course. It goes deeper. There's advanced training. There's video tutorials. There's implementation. There's all these features.
Yep.
But I really did that for people who are like, look, I'm not a good reader, or look, I don't read books. But if you had an online course, I consume online courses like no one's business.
Yeah.
So I guess now I'm on authorship and business modeling for authors here, but it's you have to change the modalities up to make sure that you are in line with the preference, the consumption preference of the customer, right? Because not everyone reads books. A very small percentage of us actually continue to read books.
And there's still a ton of people. Small. There's still a ton of people that need it.
Yeah.
So
serve it this way, serve it that way. It's you have to serve it up in different ways, and some is more advanced than others, but either way, you have to give a menu because certain people don't read, or certain people hate online courses. Certain people need the connection of that community and want to do that mastermind or group coaching approach.
Right.
Other people value one-to-one help. Right. So it's you got to have all these different kinds of ways of getting people to consume your information.
Absolutely. I'm going to what's the term? I'm going to assume it's still available on Amazon.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now I'm doing a little small promotion, not a big deal, but on my website, SeanRosensteel.com, you can actually get a free signed paperback with a little personal message in there for you.
Nice.
And just pay a small fee for shipping and handling. That'll also give you half off the audiobook and the Kindle version if you want those versions as well.
Even better.
So yeah, it's a little deal I'm doing. Not a huge deal, but something different. And then, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Hudson Book. I mean, anywhere books are sold, Apple, Google, you can find it anywhere.
Awesome. And then SeanRosensteel.com, is that the only website that you have, or do you have others? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So all of those links, guys, will be down below, of course, in the comments. Make sure that you give him a follow, check out his website, stop in, say hi. I'm assuming you're on social too, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. And I know we have those links as well. So those will also be down below. We've literally reached the end of our time, unfortunately. I never like this part of the show because it's always like, but we have so much more to talk about. I think at this point, people at least have a really good idea of what intentional living is. If you haven't been listening, go back and listen again, because Sean shared a lot. And I'm sure there's a bunch more to share. So we'd love to have you back if you have the time. We'll do a round two. We'll get a little more loose, if you will, about sharing stories and inspirations.
We'll have a little more coffee.
We'll have a little more coffee. Lord knows I need to have another cup, because that was my first one, and my tongue was pretty bad this morning when it came to getting tied up.
Mike's going to double dose the Claritin along with that caffeine.
Oh, geez. Yeah, these. For those of you that don't know and haven't really paid attention, I live in Las Vegas. Las Vegas, while it is a wonderful city to live in, out in the burbs, we have every non-native type of plant you can think of that doesn't belong in the desert, which leaves us with some kind of allergen every season of the year. And what's funny is we only have 2 seasons. cold and hot,
right?
And we still get every kind of pollen that comes in it. It's crazy. But yeah, we've reached the end of our time. We want to tell everybody again, thank you. We love you for stopping in and taking a listen. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, so you know when we get more awesome people like this to come on, share their insights, their wisdom, and their knowledge. If you're listening on any of the platforms for podcasting, make sure you download or subscribe on your favorite one. If you're listening on Anchor, you can support us. Every little bit helps. This little podcast that's growing. I think we're almost up to 120 some odd episodes at this point. My goal is to hit 5. My goal is 500.
Good for you.
I want a ton of information for everybody that's relevant to life, that's relevant to increasing and being successful in the way that they wish to be. Again, finding that purpose. Stay alive, people. Keep going. We always try to find people that can bring this kind of value to you, this kind of relevance to living. And that's the reason that we always say the same thing at the end of every show: stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, and live. For Sean Rosensteel and myself, Coffee with Mike. Ciao for now.
For more information on Java Chat, visit www.javachatpodcast.com. You've been listening to Coffee with Mike on Java Chat. Tune in weekly to this podcast for the next episode. You can also download or subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. A production of Oasis Media Group, LLC. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.